August 12, 1945. Somewhere in West Texas. The cattle car had not been designed for human cargo. Liesl Voigt pressed her back against the wooden slats, feeling the rhythmic clatter of wheels on track vibrate through her spine. Each jolt sent fresh waves of pain through muscles that had been tensed for 3 days straight. Beside her, 7-year-old Otto had finally stopped crying, his small body curled against her side like a wounded animal seeking shelter, breath coming in shuddering gasps that spoke of exhausted fear rather than any kind of peace. The rope around her wrists had rubbed the skin raw 3 days ago. Now it simply burned with constant, dull intensity, a reminder that she was property being transported, not a person being moved. She had tried to adjust the binding on the first day, tried to find some position that might ease the chafing. There was no such position. The rope was designed to restrain, not to provide comfort. 43 souls shared this darkness. 4 German families who had made the catastrophic error of being in America when war began, of having accents that marked them as enemy, of existing at the wrong moment in history. The Crystal City internment camp in South Texas had been their home for 3 years, if you could call a place where you were held against your will a home. The propaganda lessons had been thorough, relentless, designed to prepare them for what came next. Americans torture prisoners. Americans show no mercy to Germans. Americans see you as animals, not children. They will work you to death if they can. They enjoy cruelty. Teacher Heinrich had been explicit. The images he had shown, the stories he had told, the propaganda carefully preserved even in their captivity, left no room for doubt. Americans were brutal. Americans were merciless. Liesl had believed every word. She was 12 years old, and she had believed it all. Old enough to remember Hamburg before the war consumed everything. Old enough to recall the smell of the harbour, the sound of ships coming in, the taste of her grandmother's strudel on Sunday afternoons. Old enough to understand that their detention resulted from her father's work on merchant vessels when hostilities erupted. Old enough to know that the journey they were on now, shackled like livestock, would not end well. Across from her in the dimness, Friedrich Voigt sat with the hollow-eyed stillness of a man who had given up arguing with fate. Her father had been a ship's engineer once, a man who solved problems with careful hands and patient logic. 3 years of captivity had taught him that some problems have no solutions. You simply endure them, day after day, until something changes or you break. Margaret, her mother, hummed softly in the darkness. The same lullaby she had sung in Hamburg, in Crystal City, in every dark place they had found themselves since the world turned upside down. The melody was German, achingly familiar, a thread of home in a foreign land that wanted them gone. Liesl. Otto's voice was barely a whisper, small and frightened. Are they going to kill us? The question hung in the fetid air of the cattle car. Liesl felt 39 other people stop breathing, waiting for her answer. But she had attended the lessons. She had listened to teacher Heinrich. She had seen the propaganda. I don't know, Liesl whispered back, because lying to Otto had never worked. But we stay together. Whatever happens, we stay together. Do you understand me? Otto's hand found hers, small fingers threading between her bound wrists with desperate need. The gesture was so trusting, so absolutely convinced that his older sister could protect him, that Liesl felt something crack in her chest, like ice breaking under weight. She could not protect him. She was 12 years old, and tied like an animal, and being transported to God knew where, for God knew what purpose. But she squeezed his fingers anyway, because sometimes the illusion of protection was all you could offer. The train began to slow. The change in rhythm rippled through the car like electricity. Bodies shifted. Breathing quickened. Margaret's humming stopped mid-note. Marfa, someone whispered in German from the darkness. The sign outside said Marfa. Liesl had never heard of Marfa. It sounded like nothing, like the kind of place you died in without anyone noticing. The train jerked to a halt. For a long moment, nothing happened. Just the settling of the train, the creak of wood, the rapid hammering of 43 hearts. Then footsteps, boots on gravel, multiple pairs, approaching with confidence. The cattle car door shrieked open. Light flooded in, brutal and blinding after 3 days of darkness. Liesl squinted against it, raising her bound hands to shield her eyes. The brightness was physically painful. Tears streamed down her face from the sudden assault. The silhouettes in the doorway were backlit, features obscured, but their shapes were wrong. Not soldiers. The forms were too relaxed, too casual. Wide-brimmed hats instead of helmets. No rifles visible. Movement that spoke of labor rather than military precision. Cowboys. Actual cowboys. Like the ones in photographs Liesl had seen before the war. One of the silhouettes stepped forward. As Liesl's eyes adjusted, details emerged. A man in his mid-30s, perhaps 34, face carved by sun and wind into planes that suggested both hardness and something else she could not quite name. He wore denim work clothes, honest and worn, boots dusty from real labor, a chambray shirt faded from washing. He looked into the cattle car with a direct gaze. His eyes swept across the huddled families, across the children with their terrified eyes, across the rope binding small wrists. His jaw tightened. A muscle jumped in his cheek. When he turned to the young lieutenant standing beside him on the platform, his voice carried clearly into the car. It was not loud, but it had the kind of authority that made volume irrelevant. "Why are children in chains?" The question was not rhetorical. It demanded an answer. The lieutenant, crisp in his uniform, consulted a clipboard with desperate focus. "Protocol, Captain Whitmore. Enemy civilians in transport require restraints per Regulation 14-7, subsection, I have a son." Whitmore's voice cut through the recitation like a blade through paper. 12 years old, same age as that girl right there. He pointed directly at Liesl. She froze under his gaze, unable to look away. His eyes met hers across the space, and she saw something in them that made no sense, something that looked almost like anger, but not directed at her. "You think," Whitmore continued, his tone dropping to something cold and precise, "that I would want Caleb chained like an animal if he were captured in Germany? You think any father wants to see children, any children, regardless of where they were born, treated like livestock?" "Sir, the regulations clearly state that all enemy civilians require, cut them loose." The words hung in the air like a command from God. "Captain, I cannot simply disregard." "Find another rancher then, Lieutenant." Whitmore's face had gone hard as Texas bedrock. "Because I will not accept prisoners who arrive bound like animals, particularly not children. Cut them loose, or this transport ends right here, right now, and you can explain to your superiors why 43 people are still sitting in Marfa when they were supposed to be working cattle in Oklahoma." The standoff lasted perhaps 10 seconds. To Liesl, it felt like hours. The lieutenant wilted first. His shoulders sagged. "Corporal Brennan, cut them loose." A younger soldier climbed into the cattle car, wire cutters gleaming in his hand. He moved methodically down the line of prisoners, snipping through rope with small, apologetic sounds. When he reached Liesl's wrists, she felt the pressure release. Blood flow returned with pins and needles intensity. But more than physical relief, something else shifted inside her chest. Something fundamental about her understanding of the world. The man on the platform, this Captain Whitmore, had argued with military authority, had threatened to refuse the transport entirely, over children being tied with rope. The propaganda had never mentioned that possibility, had never suggested that American officers might see German children as anything other than enemy combatants. Corporal Brennan knelt beside Otto, his movements gentle. He hesitated when he saw the raw abrasions where rope had chafed 7-year-old skin for 72 hours. His jaw worked as if he wanted to speak, but could not find adequate words. Then, in accented but clear German, "Es tut mir leid," "I am sorry." Otto stared at him with huge, uncomprehending eyes. American soldiers did not apologize. Teacher Heinrich had been very clear about this. Yet here was an American soldier, kneeling in the dust, saying sorry to a 7-year-old German boy. The corporal cut the rope and moved on, leaving Otto to stare at his freed hands like they were foreign objects. Whitmore waited until all restraints were removed before speaking again. This time, he addressed the cattle car directly, his words slow and clear. "You folks are coming to work at Blackwater Creek Ranch in Oklahoma. We need hands for late summer cattle work and general ranch labor. You will be fed properly, housed decently, and treated like human beings."
Anyone have a problem with that?
Silence answered him. The prisoners had learned over 3 years that answering authority figures invited complications. Silence was safer. But Liesl saw her mother's shoulders relax slightly for the first time in days, saw other adults exchange glances that carried cautious, fragile reassessment. "All right then." Whitmore gestured toward the waiting trucks. "Let's get you out of this damn oven before someone passes out from the heat." The descent from the cattle car was awkward and ungainly. Bodies stiff from 3 days of confinement moved clumsily. Cowboys, actual cowboys in actual Western gear, stepped forward to offer hands and steady grips to those who stumbled. Liesl helped Otto down, supporting his small frame as it shook despite the oppressive heat. His legs nearly gave out when his feet touched solid earth. Around them, the West Texas landscape stretched toward infinity in every direction. Scrub brush and distant mountains, and sky so huge it made Hamburg's confined streets feel like a memory from someone else's life. No guard towers visible, no barbed wire, no fences at all that she could see, just open space and cowboys who looked more curious than hostile. The truck bed smelled of hay and livestock. Liesl sat with Otto pressed against her side, watching the landscape scroll past as they drove. The desert here was alien, sparse vegetation and rocky ground and occasional cattle that looked up incuriously as vehicles passed. Captain Whitmore sat in the front cabin of the lead truck. Through the rear window, Liesl could see his profile. He was not looking back at them, not checking to see if they might jump and run. He simply drove, one hand on the wheel, completely trusting. It made no sense according to everything she had been taught. 20 minutes into the drive, she noticed something on the dashboard of the truck. A photograph, held in place by a small clip. The angle was wrong for detail, but she could make out 2 children standing together. Corporal Brennan, riding in the truck bed with them, noticed her staring. He leaned close, voice pitched low under the road noise. "His children," he said in German. "Caleb is 12, Ruth is 8. The same ages as Liesl and Otto, almost exactly." The knowledge settled into her chest, like a stone dropping into water. This man, who had argued to cut their chains, who had refused to accept them as bound prisoners, had children the same ages as the enemy children in his truck. "Does he—" Liesl's voice came out rough from disuse and fear. She had to clear her throat. "Does he think we might hurt them? His children?" Brennan's expression shifted to something that might have been sad. "I do not think Captain Whitmore sees you as people who would hurt anyone, Fräulein. I think he sees you as children who have been hurt enough already." The ranch appeared as they crested a low rise. Blackwater Creek Ranch spread across a shallow valley where a creek provided water for livestock and irrigation for a kitchen garden that looked impossibly green against the desert's muted palette. The main house was weathered wood, silver-grey from years of sun and wind. Barns and outbuildings clustered around it. Corrals held horses that lifted their heads to watch the trucks approach. Everything spoke of work and care and attention to detail. A woman stood on the porch of the main house waiting. Even from a distance, Liesl could see the resemblance to the photograph. This must be the mother of Caleb and Ruth. She wore a simple cotton dress and an apron, dark hair pulled back, hands twisted in the apron fabric, in a gesture that spoke of nervousness barely contained. The truck stopped in front of the main house. Whitmore climbed out and the woman, his wife clearly, said something too quiet for Liesl to hear. He responded, and she nodded, though her hands remained knotted in the apron. Whitmore helped the families down from the trucks with casual competence. When he reached Liesl and Otto, he paused. "Your names?" he asked. Brennan translated. "Liesl Voigt," she managed. "This is Otto." Whitmore knelt to bring himself level with Otto's eyes. The boy shrank back, pressing against Liesl. "Hello, Otto," Whitmore said gently. Brennan's translation was softer than the original. I know you have had a very difficult few days, but you are safe now. No more chains, no more cattle cars, just honest work and honest food. Do you understand?" Otto stared at him with huge eyes, then very slowly nodded. Whitmore stood, his attention shifting to Liesl. For a long moment, he simply looked at her, not assessing, not judging, just seeing, as if she were a person rather than a problem. "You are responsible for your brother, yes?" he asked. Liesl nodded. "That is good."
Brothers need sisters. Sisters need brothers.
Something flickered across his face, too quick to identify. "Come, you must be starving." He was not wrong. Liesl could not remember the last time hunger had been about wanting food, rather than about the constant absence of adequate nutrition. The smell hit her 30 yards from the house. Liesl stopped walking, stunned by the sensory assault. Fried chicken crackling in hot oil, fresh cornbread, the yeast smell unmistakable, mashed potatoes rich with cream and butter. The scents layered over each other, building into something that made her stomach clench with sudden, desperate hunger. Real food, not the thin soups and rationed portions of internment, real, abundant, American food prepared with care. Otto grabbed her hand. "Liesl," he whispered, "do you smell that?" She could not answer. Her throat had closed around words. The woman on the porch, Mrs. Whitmore, Liesl assumed, smiled at them as they approached, a genuine expression that reached her eyes. She said something in English, warm and welcoming. Brennan translated. "Mrs. Whitmore says welcome to Blackwater Creek. She hopes you are hungry." The dining room was larger than their entire barracks room in Crystal City. A long table dominated the space, already set with plates and silverware and serving dishes that steamed gently. Real windows, with actual glass, that opened. The Voigt family stood uncertainly in the doorway, unsure of protocol. Were they meant to sit? To wait? To ask permission? Whitmore gestured toward the table. "Please, sit anywhere." The words were simple. The invitation was revolutionary. Liesl chose chairs near the middle, helping Otto climb onto his seat. Friedrich and Margaret sat across from them, both wearing identical expressions of wary confusion. This was not how prisoners were treated. This was how family ate. The other German families filed in, taking seats with careful silence. Cowboys drifted in as well, grabbing plates and food with casual familiarity. No separation between captors and captives, just people gathering for a meal. Mrs. Whitmore, Connie, Liesl heard someone call her, moved through the room with practiced efficiency. She placed a basket of cornbread on the table, the bread still hot enough to steam when broken open. She ladled chicken onto plates. She scooped mashed potatoes with generosity that spoke of abundance. When she reached Otto, she paused. The boy was staring at the food with an intensity that bordered on pain. Connie Whitmore said something in English, her voice gentle. She picked up a piece of cornbread, still warm, and placed it directly into Otto's small hands. Then she mimed eating, her smile encouraging. Otto looked at Liesl. She nodded, not trusting her voice. He bit into the cornbread. Butter, real butter, yellow and rich, melted out and ran down his chin. His eyes went wide with shock. Then, to Liesl's horror and heartbreak, he began to cry while he chewed. Not sobbing, just silent tears streaming down his face as he tasted something he had forgotten existed. Comfort, safety, abundance, all contained in one piece of warm bread. Connie Whitmore's hand came to rest gently on top of Otto's head. She did not speak. She simply stood there, her touch light and careful, while a 7-year-old enemy child wept into her cornbread. Liesl reached for the fried chicken with trembling hands. The skin was golden brown and glistening, crackling slightly as her fork pierced it. The smell was overwhelming up close, salt and herbs and the rich scent of properly fried meat. The first bite shattered her composure. Crisp skin giving way to tender, seasoned meat, fat and flavor, and the distinctive taste of chicken fried with expertise. It was nothing like the bland, stringy meat of camp rations. This was food prepared by someone who cared about feeding people well.
Her fork clattered to the plate. She pressed both hands to her mouth, trying desperately to hold back the sob building in her chest. She failed, utterly. She was crying, in front of strangers, in front of Americans, crying over fried chicken like a child. Across the table, Margaret had covered her face with her hands, shoulders shaking. Friedrich had set his fork down carefully, his hands trembling too violently to hold utensils. Around the table, other German families were experiencing similar breakdowns, 3 years of deprivation hitting them all at once. The Cowboys ate quietly, respectfully, not staring but not ignoring either, bearing witness to grief and relief in equal measure. Whitmore sat at the head of the table, a cup of coffee in his hands, watching the scene with an expression Liesl could not read. Not satisfaction, exactly. Something quieter, something that looked almost like sorrow. After what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, Liesl managed to collect herself enough to continue eating. The food was still warm, still abundant, still impossibly good. Otto ate with both hands, his small face intent. He had stopped crying, but his cheeks were still wet. "Liesl," he whispered in German, "why are they doing this? Why are they being kind?" It was the question spinning through her mind as well. Why feed them like this? Why remove the chains? Why treat enemy children as if they mattered? She had no answer. Nothing in 3 years of propaganda had prepared her for Americans who behaved like decent human beings. The meal continued. Mrs. Whitmore moved through the room, refilling plates without being asked. A cowboy brought out apple pie, actual pie, with flaky crust and cinnamon filling. When plates were finally empty, Whitmore stood. The room quieted. "I know you are exhausted," he said, Brennan translating. "We have prepared housing for you. Tomorrow we will discuss work. For tonight, rest, recover. You are safe here." He paused, his gaze moving across each family. "You are not prisoners at Blackwater Creek. You are workers. You will be treated as such, with respect, with fairness, with the dignity every person deserves." Another pause. "You are not animals." The words hit Liesl like a physical blow, direct contradiction of everything teacher Heinrich had taught them. Whitmore continued, "You are people. You are somebody's children, somebody's parents, somebody's family. That matters here. Do you understand? That will always matter here." Around the table, German families nodded slowly, still uncertain but beginning to believe that perhaps this strange man meant what he said. The bunkhouse was clean. That was Liesl's first thought as they entered. Clean and solid and equipped with real beds, not cots, but actual mattresses with clean blankets and pillows that smelled of soap and sunshine. Windows that opened and closed, a wood stove for heat, shelves where personal items could be stored. It was better than Crystal City, better than anything Liesl had experienced since Hamburg. Otto claimed a bed near their parents. Margaret helped him remove his shoes, her movements gentle. Friedrich stood at the window, looking out at the darkening Texas landscape. His shoulders had the set Liesl recognized from difficult moments, when the ship had gone down, when they had been detained, when the war had been declared lost. "Papa?" Liesl joined him. "They fed us, Liesl, real food. They removed our chains. They spoke to us like humans." His voice was barely audible. "Everything we were taught was wrong." "Not exaggerated," Margaret said from Otto's bedside. "Completely, absolutely wrong." The enormity of that realization settled over the room like a physical weight. If the propaganda about American treatment of prisoners was entirely false, what else might be false? Liesl pulled out the small diary she had managed to keep through detention and transport. The pencil was worn to a stub, but it still wrote. She opened to a blank page and wrote in German, "August 12th, 1945, first day at Blackwater Creek Ranch, Oklahoma. They cut our chains. They fed us real food, chicken and cornbread and butter. Captain Whitmore has children. Caleb is 12, same as me. Ruth is 8, close to Otto's age. He said we are not animals. He said we are somebody's children. I do not understand why they are being kind. I do not understand anything anymore." She closed the diary and looked out the window at the vast Texas night. Stars emerged in patterns that looked the same, whether viewed from Germany or America. Somewhere in the ranch house, Captain Whitmore was probably sitting with his wife, probably looking at photographs of Caleb and Ruth, probably thinking about children the same ages as the enemy children he had just freed from chains. Liesl wondered what he saw when he looked at her. Threat? Problem? Burden? Or just a 12-year-old girl who had spent 3 days in a cattle car and cried over fried chicken? Tomorrow would bring work and expectations and reality. But tonight, in this clean bunkhouse with full stomachs and rope-free wrists, Liesl allowed herself something she had not felt in 3 years. A fragile, terrifying, absolutely irrational hope that perhaps not all Americans were what teacher Heinrich had promised, that perhaps kindness, even toward enemies, was possible, that perhaps the world was more complicated than propaganda allowed. She fell asleep to the sound of Otto's even breathing and her mother's quiet humming, the same German lullaby that had followed them across an ocean and into captivity, and now, impossibly, into something that almost felt like safety. August 19th, 1945. 1 week at Blackwater Creek. Dawn came early to Oklahoma in late summer. Liesl woke to light filtering through windows, to air that already carried the day's coming heat, to the sound of horses and men's voices calling to each other. 7 days had passed since the cattle car. 7 days of work that was hard but not cruel, of meals that were adequate but not extravagant, of treatment that remained stubbornly, confusingly decent. Liesl had been assigned to work with Connie Whitmore in the kitchen garden and house. The labor was familiar. She had helped her mother in Hamburg Gardens before the war. But working alongside Connie was different from working under guards. Connie spoke constantly, a gentle stream of English that Liesl did not understand but found oddly soothing. She demonstrated rather than commanded, showed rather than ordered, and when Liesl made mistakes, pulled the wrong plant, watered too much, Connie simply corrected without reproach. On the 3rd day, Connie had pressed a worn cotton dress into Liesl's hands, not new, clearly one of her own from years past, but clean and whole. The dress fit reasonably well. Connie had smiled, said something warm in English, and touched Liesl's cheek with calloused fingers that carried more gentleness than Liesl had experienced in years. Otto had transformed even more dramatically. The 7-year-old who had cried through the cattle car now spent his days helping with chickens and playing near the creek. His laughter, rare and precious, sometimes drifted through open windows. Real laughter, genuine joy. Friedrich worked with cattle and horses. The Cowboys, Jake and Silas and old Ben, treated him as a worker rather than a prisoner, showed him techniques without condescension, trusted him with tools and animals and responsibility. It was breaking something in her father. Liesl could see it in the way his shoulders had begun to straighten, in the occasional smile. 3 years of being treated as threat had convinced him he was those things. 1 week of being treated as competent was starting to convince him otherwise. On the morning of the 7th day, Captain Whitmore gathered the German families in the shade of the largest barn. The August sun was already brutal, and he had positioned everyone where the building's shadow provided relief. Corporal Brennan stood beside him, ready to translate. "I want to show you something," Whitmore began. His tone was careful, measured. "Something I received yesterday." He pulled an envelope from his shirt pocket, standard military issue, addressed in careful handwriting. He opened it and withdrew 2 sheets of paper covered in a child's uneven script. "This is from my son, Caleb. He's 12 years old, home in Fort Worth with his mother and sister while I finish this work detail." Whitmore's voice carried something Liesl could not identify. Pride, perhaps, or homesickness. "He writes to me every week," Brennan translated smoothly, and Liesl felt a strange tightening in her chest. "Caleb, the boy from the photograph," Whitmore continued. "Caleb knows you are here. His mother told him we have German families working the ranch. He had questions." A pause. "I want to read you what he wrote, if you do not mind." No one spoke. Whitmore cleared his throat and began to read. Brennan translated each line. "Dear Dad, Mom showed me the pictures you sent of the ranch. She told me about the German families who came to work there.
She said some of them are kids like me. I asked Mom if they were mean, because of the war and everything. She said you told her they were just scared. She said one girl is exactly my age, 12, and she has a little brother who is 7. Dad, I know they are from Germany and we fought Germany, but Mom says kids do not start wars. She says kids just get caught in them. I have been praying for them. I pray the girl whose name Mom said is Liesel is not too scared anymore. I pray her little brother Otto is okay. Are they nice? Do they like the ranch? Tell them I'm praying for them if that is okay. I miss you. Come home soon. Love, Caleb. The silence that followed was absolute. Liesel stood frozen, unable to process what she had just heard. Caleb Whitmore, 12 years old, in Texas, praying for her, praying for Otto, asking if they were nice. I wanted you to know, Whitmore said quietly, that my son does not see you as enemies. He sees you as children who have been through something difficult. He prays for you. That matters to him. It matters to me. He folded the letter carefully. I am telling you this because I want you to understand. You are not abstract concepts here. You are not just laborers or problems to be managed. You are Liesel and Otto and Friedrich and Margaret. You are people my son prays for. You are real. Liesel felt something crack inside her chest. A 12-year-old boy she had never met was praying for her safety, was concerned about her fear. It was incomprehensible. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. After the gathering dispersed, Liesel approached Corporal Brennan with a request that took all her courage to voice. Could I write back to Caleb, to thank him? Brennan's expression softened. I will ask Captain Whitmore. The answer came that afternoon. Yes, of course. Whitmore would translate it himself. Liesel sat at the small table in the bunkhouse with precious paper and a borrowed pencil. She wrote in German, knowing Whitmore would render it into English. Dear Caleb, my name is Liesel Voigt. I am 12 years old. I am from Hamburg, Germany. Your father showed us your letter. Thank you for praying for me and Otto. No one has prayed for us in a very long time. Your father is the kindest man I have ever met. He cut the chains off our wrists when we arrived. He feeds us real food. He treats us like people, not prisoners. I think you must be a kind person too, to pray for people you have never met. Otto is better now. He laughs sometimes. That is new. I did not think he would laugh again. I like the ranch very much. The horses are beautiful. The food is good. Your mother is teaching my mother to make biscuits. Thank you for not hating us, even though our countries were enemies. It means more than I can say. I hope one day I can meet you and thank you in person. Sincerely, Liesel. She gave the letter to Brennan, who passed it to Whitmore, who read it that evening with an expression Liesel glimpsed through the window. Something that looked like satisfaction or hope. September 3rd, 1945, day 22. The announcement came during breakfast. Whitmore stood at the head of the long table, coffee in hand, waiting for conversation to quiet. Today we start riding lessons for anyone interested. The statement landed like a stone in still water. Riding lessons for prisoners. We need all capable hands for the cattle work coming up, Whitmore continued, Brennan translating. That means spending time on horseback. For those who have never ridden, we will teach you. For those who have, we will help you improve. Friedrich spoke for the first time in Whitmore's presence. You would trust us with horses? The question carried layers. Horses meant mobility, meant freedom, meant power to leave, to escape. Whitmore met Friedrich's eyes directly. I trust you to learn. I trust you to try. I trust you to understand that a horse is a partner, not a tool. He paused. Do you think that trust is misplaced? No, Friedrich said after a long moment. No, I do not think so. Then we begin this afternoon. The corral was dusty in the September heat. 6 horses stood saddled and waiting. Cowboys lounged on the fence rails, ready to assist. Whitmore led the first demonstration himself. He moved around the horse, a big bay gelding named Ranger, with easy confidence, showing how to approach, how to mount, how to hold reins. Horses feel your fear,
he explained. "Feel your tension. You must breathe, must trust. They will take care of you if you let them." Then he invited Friedrich forward. Liesel watched her father approach the massive animal with visible trepidation. Friedrich Voigt had spent his life on ships and in factories. He had never been closer to a horse than necessary to avoid one in the street. Whitmore helped him mount, steadied him in the saddle, adjusted stirrups with patient hands. "Just sit," Whitmore instructed. "Feel his breathing. Let your body move with him." He led Ranger in a slow walk around the corral. Friedrich sat rigidly at first, every muscle locked. But Whitmore's voice continued, calm and unhurried, and gradually Friedrich's shoulders relaxed. By the third circuit, he was smiling, actually smiling. The expression transformed his face, erasing years of worry. For a moment he looked like the father Liesel remembered from Hamburg. "You are a natural," Whitmore said, and Brennan's translation carried genuine warmth. Then Whitmore called her forward. "Miss Liesel, would you like to try?" Her heart hammered. The horse designated for her was smaller than Ranger, but still enormous from ground level. A bay mare with kind eyes and grey in her muzzle. "This is Juniper," Whitmore said. "She is 12 years old, same as you. She has taught many children to ride. She will take care of you." Liesel approached slowly. Juniper lowered her head, breath warm and grassy. Velvet nose investigating this new, small human. Whitmore showed her how to mount. His hands were impersonal, focused on her safety. He adjusted her feet in the stirrups, placed the reins in her hands. "You are lighter than she is used to," he said. "She will barely notice you are there. Just hold the reins gently. Keep your heels down. Let her walk." He stepped back. Juniper started moving at some signal Liesel did not consciously give. The ground fell away beneath her. She was riding, actually riding a horse. The motion was rhythmic, oddly soothing. Juniper's muscles moved beneath the saddle in a pattern that felt ancient and sure. Around the corral they went, once, twice, 3 times. With each circuit, something inside Liesel shifted, settled, reformed. If Americans gave prisoners horses to ride, what else had the propaganda lied about? If enemies could be trusted with animals this powerful, what did that say about the nature of enmity itself? She dismounted on shaking legs. Whitmore steadied her. "Well done," he said, just 2 words, but his approval felt more substantial than any praise she had received from teachers or guards. That night, unable to sleep, Liesel wrote in her diary with hands that still trembled. "They let us ride horses." Papa smiled. "I do not understand this place. I do not understand these people. Everything I was taught is wrong." September 21st, 1945. 6 weeks at Blackwater Creek. Otto had been begging for days to ride a real horse, not just sit on one while it stood still. The 7-year-old had watched older riders with intense longing, his small hands mimicking rein holds. Jake, one of the senior Cowboys, finally agreed. "We will start you on Dusty, oldest, gentlest horse on the ranch, 18 years old and patient as stone." Dusty was a grey gelding who had taught 3 generations of ranch children to ride. His days of cattle work were long past. Now he served as educator, moving with deliberate care under uncertain riders. Otto was lifted into the saddle with ceremony. His feet did not reach the stirrups properly, so Jake tied them at a shorter length. The boy's face was pure joy. "Just hold on," Jake instructed through Brennan. "Dusty knows what to do. You just sit." They started at a walk around the corral. Otto's grin could have lit the Oklahoma darkness. Liesel watched from the fence, relief and happiness warring in her chest. 10 minutes in, a rattlesnake, invisible in the dust until Dusty's hoof nearly struck it, erupted from concealment with its distinctive sound. Dusty, patient Dusty, 18-year-old Dusty, reacted on instinct older than training. He shied violently sideways. Otto, 7 years old and 40 pounds, and not properly braced, flew from the saddle like a rag doll. The sound of his body hitting packed earth was flat and terrible. Then the snap of bone breaking, sharp and distinct. Then Otto's scream, high and agonized. Liesel vaulted the fence without conscious thought. She reached Otto in seconds, dropped to her knees beside him. His right arm bent at an angle arms should not bend. His face was white with shock and pain. "Otto, Otto, I am here. You are all right." She was lying. He was not all right. His arm was broken, and they were prisoners, and Captain Whitmore would be angry, and Whitmore appeared. She had not seen him approach. He knelt on Otto's other side, hands moving over the injury with careful expertise. "Broken," he said shortly. "Clean break, I think. Brennan, get my truck. We are going to Doc Hayes in Lawton." "Captain, I can drive," Jake began, voice tight with guilt. "No, I will take him." Whitmore's tone allowed no argument. He gathered Otto with infinite care, lifting the child against his chest. Otto's sobs soaked into Whitmore's shirt. "Liesel, you come too. Friedrich, Marguerite, if you want to come." They piled into Whitmore's truck, a family traveling with a man who had every right to be angry about injury occurring under his watch. He showed no anger, only focus, only concern. The drive to Lawton took 45 minutes. Whitmore drove faster than safe, one hand on the wheel, the other steadying Otto in Liesel's lap. He spoke quietly to the boy in English throughout. Liesel did not understand the words, but the tone was unmistakable. Reassurance, the voice a father uses with his frightened child. Doc Hayes was in his office when they arrived. He took one look at Otto's arm and ushered them into an examination room with professional efficiency. The setting of the bone was brutal. Otto screamed despite the local anesthetic. Liesel held his good hand and whispered German prayers she had not known she remembered. Friedrich and Margaret stood against the wall, faces grey with helplessness. Whitmore stayed throughout. He did not have to. This was not his child, not his responsibility beyond the bare minimum. But he stayed, held Otto steady when the bone was aligned, spoke to Doc Hayes in low tones, paid for the treatment from his own wallet. Liesel saw him count out $18, nearly 2 weeks' wages. By the time they drove back, Otto was drowsy from pain medication, his arm properly splintered and bound. He had stopped crying, but his face was still swollen. Whitmore carried him into the bunkhouse and laid him on the bed with gentleness. Connie appeared within minutes, set up watch beside Otto's bed with water and cool cloths. Outside, under emerging stars, Liesel found Whitmore and Brennan talking in low voices. "Captain Whitmore," she said. Brennan began to translate, even though Whitmore was already turning. "Why did you pay for the doctor? Why did you take Otto yourself? We are prisoners. We are Germans. We are supposed to be enemies." Whitmore was quiet for a long moment. "He is 7 years old," he finally said. "Same age my Ruth was last year, when she broke her arm falling from a tree. When that happened, I drove her to the doctor. I paid for treatment. I sat with her while bones were set." He looked at Liesel directly. "What kind of man would I be if I did different for Otto just because his parents were born in Hamburg instead of Texas?" The answer should have been obvious. Any kind of man, a normal man. But Whitmore was not asking a rhetorical question. "A cruel man," Liesel whispered. "A man without honor." "Yes, that is what I think too," Brennan spoke quietly. "Captain Whitmore lost a brother in the Pacific, died at Guadalcanal in 42. The captain has every reason to hate Germans, but he says hate is easy. Treating people with decency when you have every excuse not to, that requires being the man you want to be." That night, Liesel wrote another letter to Caleb, describing how his father had treated Otto like he would treat Caleb or Ruth. November 1st, 1945. The announcement came during evening meal. Whitmore stood with an envelope. "I received communication from military authorities," he began, "regarding repatriation schedules." Liesel's stomach dropped. "You will be returning to Germany in December. Middle of the month, most likely. Going home. To Germany. To whatever remained. It should have been joyful news. It should have been relief. Instead, Liesel felt something close to grief. "I know this is complicated," Whitmore continued. "Germany is not in good condition. Rebuilding will be hard. But you will be with your families again, in your home country." He paused. "You have 6 weeks left here. We will make the most of them." That night, Otto curled against Liesel's side. "I do not want to go back," he whispered. "I like it here." "I know," Liesel said gently. "I know, Otto." "Can we stay?" "No, we cannot. This is not our home." "It feels like home." Yes, it did. That was the problem. The work changed in those final weeks. Whitmore began teaching skills with deliberate purpose, skills for survival in a broken country. Friedrich spent mornings with the ranch mechanic, learning equipment repair. Not just following instructions, but understanding principles. On the last day of the third week, Whitmore appeared with a canvas bag. He set it on the workbench in front of Friedrich. "Tools," Whitmore said simply. "Wrenches, pliers, screwdrivers, nothing fancy, but good quality. Yours to keep." Friedrich stared. "Captain, I cannot." "You can. You will need them." Whitmore's tone allowed no argument. "Germany will need mechanics, engineers, men who can fix what is broken. You are that man, Friedrich." The bag represented perhaps $30. Money Whitmore did not have to spend, on a German prisoner he would never see again. Friedrich's voice cracked. "Why?" "Because tools in the hands of a skilled man help rebuild countries." Whitmore met his eyes. "Because you have worked hard here. Because you deserve to succeed. Because you are somebody's father, and fathers need to provide." That evening, Liesel found her father in the bunkhouse, tools spread across his bunk, touching each piece with reverent fingers. His eyes were wet. "He sees me," Friedrich whispered in German, "not as enemy, not as prisoner, as a man, as someone with value." Margaret received similar instruction from Connie: food preservation without refrigeration, soap making from basic ingredients, gardening in poor soil. The week before Thanksgiving, Connie pressed a small notebook into Margaret's hands. Inside were recipes written in careful English with detailed drawings, measurements, techniques. Margaret held the notebook to her chest and wept. For Liesel, Connie taught sewing and mending, how to make clothing last, how to repurpose fabric, how to create warmth from scraps. On a cold afternoon, Connie pulled Liesel into an embrace that smelled of flour and soap and safety. The girl who had arrived in chains melted into those arms. Otto continued riding lessons with fierce determination. Jake taught not just riding, but roping, responsibility. When Otto successfully roped a fence post on his third attempt, Jake whooped approval. Otto's grin could have powered the entire ranch. December 1st, 1945. 2 weeks remaining. The photographer arrived from Lawton on a cold Saturday morning. Whitmore had arranged it without announcement. "I want photographs," he explained, "to remember, for all of us." They assembled in front of the main house. The 4 German families, Whitmore and Connie, the Cowboys, Corporal Brennan. "Steady now," the photographer called. "Hold still." The shutter clicked. Time froze. That moment would outlive many of them, would cross an ocean, would survive decades. Whitmore ordered 2 copies of every photograph, one set for the German families, one set for the ranch. "So we never forget each other," he said quietly. When the prince arrived a week later, Liesel stared at her own image, a 12-year-old who looked both older and younger than her years, standing next to Otto, who grinned at the camera. Behind them, their parents showing cautious hope. And at the edge of the frame, Captain Everett Whitmore, the man who had changed everything. She tucked the photograph carefully into her diary, her most valuable possession. December 10th, 1945. 1 day remaining. The bonfire blazed behind the ranch house as night settled. All the ranch hands gathered, plus the German families, drawn by Whitmore's quiet request. The December cold bit through clothing, but the fire's heat pushed it back. Flames danced against darkness, throwing shadows. Whitmore stood beside the fire, coffee cup in his hands, waiting for conversation to quiet. When silence settled, he spoke. "Tomorrow you go back to Germany." His voice was measured, calm. "Back to a country that has been through hell. Back to uncertainty and hardship I cannot fully imagine." He paused. "I will not pretend to understand what you will face. The reports from Europe are not encouraging. Food shortages, destroyed cities, a population trying to survive winter in ruins. He took a breath. But I want you to know why we treated you the way we did these past 4 months. Liesel leaned forward, unwilling to miss a word. I have a son, Caleb. He is 12 years old, same age as Liesel. Whitmore's gaze found her across the flames. I have a daughter, Ruth. She is 8, close to Otto's age. If my children had been captured in Germany, if they had been detained and transported and held as prisoners, I would have prayed every night that someone would see them as children, not as enemies, not as problems, as somebody's son and daughter who were frightened and far from home. His voice caught. That is all I did. I looked at Otto and saw Caleb. I looked at Liesel and saw Ruth. I looked at all of you and saw people who deserved basic human decency, regardless of what governments decided about war. The fire crackled. No one else spoke. You are not animals. You are not property. You are people, somebody's children, somebody's family. That matters. That has to matter. He stared into flames. I do not know if this war taught anyone anything, but I know what I learned. Choosing kindness when you have power over others is not weakness. It is the only real strength there is. He pulled an envelope from his jacket. One more thing. He handed it to Friedrich. Inside were crisp bills. Friedrich's sharp intake of breath told everyone the amount was significant. $85 for each family. The Geneva Convention does not require this, but I want you to have it. For your journey. For getting started again. Friedrich's knees buckled. Whitmore moved fast, gripping his shoulders, pulling him upright. Stand up, Friedrich. You are a man. You are a father. You are an engineer with skills and worth. You do not kneel to me or anyone. Friedrich stood, tears streaming. I do not know how to thank you. You rebuild. You take care of your family. You teach your children that enemies can choose to be decent. That is thanks enough. Margaret embraced Connie. Otto ran to Whitmore, who lifted the boy. You keep practicing that roping, Otto. Being gentle with animals and people does not make you weak. It makes you strong. Whitmore turned to Liesel. He placed a hand on her shoulder, held her gaze. In careful English, she said, "Thank you, Captain Whitmore." His hand tightened. You are going to do important things, Liesel Voigt. You have strength most people never find. Use it well. Use it to build something better than what this war destroyed. He paused. Tell your children about this someday. Tell them that enemies can choose to see each other as human. That is how we prevent the next war. With millions of individual choices, to see people instead of abstractions. December 11th, 1945. Dawn. The truck idled in pre-dawn darkness. Final gifts appeared. Otto received his lasso and a cowboy hat. Jake pressed a carved wooden horse into Otto's palm. Made it myself, so you remember Dusty. So you remember that gentle things can still be strong. Liesel received Connie's woven saddle blanket, the recipe notebook, the photograph. At the truck, Whitmore knelt to Liesel's level. Remember what I told you. You are not defined by what your government did. You are defined by the choices you make. His eyes held hers. You are one of the bravest people I have ever met. You survived things no child should face. You kept your brother safe. You learned to trust again. That takes more courage than any soldier shows. She threw her arms around his neck. Thank you for cutting our chains. Thank you for feeding us. Thank you for seeing us as people. As the truck pulled away, Liesel looked back. Whitmore stood with Connie, hand raised in farewell. She raised her hand in response and held it there until the ranch disappeared. March 1946, Hamburg, Germany. The city Liesel remembered no longer existed. In its place was an apocalyptic landscape of rubble, buildings reduced to hollow shells. The smell of destruction hung over everything. People lived in cellars, scavenging for fuel and food. Children with hollow eyes picked through debris. The contrast to Blackwater Creek was absolute. Food rations provided perhaps 1,000 calories per day when they came at all. Into this devastation, the Voigt family brought tools and seeds and knowledge. And something else. the memory of being treated with dignity. Friedrich set up a small repair shop in a partially collapsed building. He used Whitmore's tools to fix machinery for neighbors who had nothing to pay him with. When people asked why he worked for free, he said simply, "A man in America taught me that helping others is how you rebuild from nothing. That is what we do now." Margaret planted the American seeds. When the first shoots appeared, impossibly green against grey rubble, neighbors gathered to stare. She shared the harvest, taught Connie's preservation methods. Otto taught neighborhood children to make toys from rope and scrap wood. His laughter became something other children sought out. And Liesel returned to school when it reopened. The teacher was Herr Schneider, former party member. On the third day, he made a fatal mistake. "The Americans treated us brutally as prisoners," he said, "worked us like slaves, showed us no mercy." Liesel stood. "That is not true, Herr Schneider." His face darkened. "Sit down, Fräulein Voigt." "No, I was there. I was an American prisoner for 4 months. You were not. You dare contradict. They cut the chains off my wrists. They fed us real food at a table where we sat with them as equals. They taught us to ride horses. When my brother broke his arm, the American captain drove him 45 miles to a doctor and paid from his own money." The classroom was silent. "They gave my father tools to rebuild Germany. They treated us like people, not animals. They were kinder to us than many Germans were to each other before the war." "You speak treason." "I speak truth. You taught us to hate. Captain Whitmore taught us to be human. I choose to believe him. I choose to remember that even in the worst war in history, some people chose kindness." Herr Schneider did not return after that week. Around the room, students looked at Liesel with new awareness, questions forming, certainties cracking. August 1971, 26 years later. The letter arrived in July, forwarded through multiple addresses. "Dear Liesel, you do not know me, but I know you. My name is Caleb Whitmore. I am writing with difficult news. My father is very ill. The doctors say he has perhaps a few months. He speaks of you often, of the German families who worked our ranch in 1945. He keeps your photograph on his desk, has looked at it nearly every day for 26 years. If there is any way you could come to Oklahoma, I know it would mean everything to him. The girl who wrote to me in 1945 said she hoped to meet me someday. I hope that day can be soon. Caleb Whitmore." Liesel was 38 now, married to Dietrich, a good man who had also been a prisoner. They had 2 daughters, Constance, named for Connie Whitmore, and Anna. "I have to go," she told her husband. "I know, we will find the money." Otto insisted on coming. "Uncle Everett, I need to see him again." Caleb met them at the airport, 38, tall, prematurely grey, with his father's steady eyes. When he saw Liesel, he crossed the terminal and embraced her. "You came. You actually came." "Of course I came. You prayed for me when I was frightened. Your father changed my life." The ranch looked unchanged. Same buildings, same corrals, same vast sky. But Captain Everett Whitmore looked very different. He sat on the porch, wrapped in a blanket despite August heat. Illness had carved him down, his hair white, face gaunt, hands trembling. But when Liesel and Otto appeared, his eyes lit with recognition and joy. "Liesel! Otto! You came!" Liesel knelt beside his chair, taking his hands. "Captain Whitmore, we came to say thank you." "For what? For giving you work?" "For seeing us as human when you could have chosen not to. For teaching me that kindness is possible even between enemies." She pulled out the photograph, 26 years old, edges worn. "I have looked at this every single day. Every day I remembered what you taught me. Every day I tried to be worthy of the kindness you showed a 12-year-old enemy child." Whitmore's eyes filled with tears. He touched the photograph. "I kept mine too. On my desk, reminded myself that we made the right choice." Otto stepped forward with the wooden horse. "Uncle Everett, I am 33. I am a machinist. I have a son. I teach him to be gentle and strong, like you taught me, and I have kept this for 26 years. Jake made that, wanted it to be perfect for you. It is perfect. It has always been perfect."
That evening, Connie prepared the same meal from August 12, 1945. Fried chicken, cornbread, mashed potatoes. When Otto took one bite, tears streamed down his face, the grateful tears of a man who had found his way home. After dinner, Liesl sat with Whitmore on the porch. "I need to tell you something. When I returned to Germany, our teacher told us Americans had been brutal to prisoners. I stood up and told the truth, told them how you treated us. The teacher left, and I realized what you taught me was not just about being kind to prisoners. It was about choosing what kind of person to be when you have power over others."
Whitmore was quiet.
"My brother died at Guadalcanal. I hated the Japanese, hated Germans. But then Caleb asked, 'Did Japanese children kill Uncle Michael?' And I said no. And he said, 'Then why would we hate them?' Children do not start wars, Liesl. They just get caught in them. The choice to be kind, that saved me as much as it saved you." November 1971. 3 months later. The telegram reached Liesl in Hamburg. Captain Everett Whitmore passed peacefully November 18th. Funeral, November 22nd. Please come if you can. Caleb Liesl was on a plane within 24 hours. The church was packed with ranchers and neighbors and people whose lives Whitmore had touched. Liesl sat in the front row with Caleb's family, an honored guest. When Caleb asked if she would speak, she stood without hesitation. "My name is Liesl Dietrich. 26 years ago, I was Liesl Voigt. I was 12. I was a prisoner. I was an enemy. I was terrified."
Captain Everett Whitmore cut the chains off my wrists. He fed me when we expected cruelty. He taught us to ride horses. When my brother broke his arm, Captain Whitmore drove him to a doctor and paid from his own pocket. Her voice grew stronger. He did not do these things because regulations required it. He did them because he looked at 2 German children and saw his own son and daughter. He chose to see us as human when everything gave him permission not to. That choice changed my life, changed how I saw the world, changed what I believed about people, gave me faith that even in the darkest times, individuals can choose goodness. I went back to Germany in 1945, to a destroyed country, to hunger and desperation. But I carried the memory of being treated with dignity, and I used that memory to build a life, to raise children who know that enemies can choose to be human. Her voice broke. Captain Whitmore told me that children do not start wars. They just get caught in them.
He treated us like the children we were, like people who mattered. Because he gave us that chance, I have spent 26 years trying to be worthy of his kindness, trying to pass on what he taught me. Captain Everett Whitmore was a good man, a kind man, a man who chose humanity over hatred, who chose to see people instead of enemies. I will make sure my children know his name, know that Captain Everett Whitmore changed the world, one act of kindness at a time, starting with cutting chains off a 12-year-old girl who thought all Americans were monsters. After the service, Liesl placed the photograph on the casket. She touched the wood and whispered in German, "Danke, Captain Whitmore. Danke für alles. I will never forget. I will make sure no one forgets." She flew back to Hamburg the next day, but she carried a promise, a sacred obligation, to tell the story, to pass it forward.
To make sure that Everett Whitmore's choice to see humanity in enemy children would echo through generations. She kept that promise.